Hello everyone and welcome to this video which is in our Great Engine Middlegames series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler and we're taking a look at a very interesting game between Igel-rofChade, TCEC, Season 22, Division P. Neither of these engines are part of the top three, but they have produced a lot of interesting chess during the TCEC Division P, and this game is no exception. So what is this position? Well, it arises from a classical Dutch. I mean, white's clear space advantage, I think, is the first factor that jumps out at you. So black's pieces are bunched on the bottom three ranks, with the exception of that slightly odd black queen on f5, which actually itself doesn't have that many squares available. White's pieces are also, exerting some nice concerted pressure in the centre. It's sort of like a diamond structure somehow, pyramid structure in the centre. Whereas black's pieces are not really coordinating great at the moment. I mean, we've got the half-open f-file, but the bishop on f6 is in the way, and the bishop f6 is restricted by the knight on e7. So, that's a little bit awkward for black, and well, that logjam was created by the advance of the d pawn to d5, and actually, this advance of the pawn on d5, chasing the knight away from e7, has left these queenside pawns looking somewhat vulnerable. I mean, they're all a bit empty on the queenside, and well, I mean, there are. You certainly think of ways like, for example, queen a5, for example, just to attack them and exploit that lack of protection. So another, yeah, I mean, if you're looking, that's all the positive stuff for white, really. I suppose, if you're looking for black, you can say that black's got the two bishops, although, obviously knight takes f6 can easily remove that. And black's got two central pawns, d6, e6 to white's one, so those are little advantages. But in general, I think, you like white quite a bit there. Now the interesting thing is, I mean, there is some tension in the position between the the pawns on e6 and d5, and actually at the moment black is kind of threatening to win a pawn. It's attacking d5 with 1, 2, 3, and white's only defending with 1, 2. So that is kind of a threat. But yeah, obviously it's going to be pretty fraught, and it also when you play e takes d5, c takes d5, it opens up the attack of the rook on the c7 pawn. So yeah, that's obviously going to be pretty fraught, but it's something that white's got to sort of look at all the time. The other thing that this tension gives white is the opportunity to you can clear the centre, maybe open up the line for this bishop on g2. There might be some sort of possibilities there. Certainly that's, something that you should be taking into account. So, I mean, if you're looking at white plans, I mean, in general, I think you'd start off by looking at concrete stuff first. So, can I clear the centre of pawns and somehow win something with attacks? Or have I got something like queen a5 attacking the pawns on the queenside pawns? If that sort of concrete action isn't really that great, then well, I mean, you're never going to forget it. You're always going to keep it in your head because big part of the position. But I guess the most natural positional thing to do would be to gain space on the queen side. Start moving your queenside pawns up this way and just cramp black, basically. I mean, that would be a very sensible thing to do as well. Looking at black ideas, not so easy really to say. I think it's one of those situations where you say, black's going to be reacting to white rather than really choosing what he wants to do. I mean, if you gave me, 2 or 3 moves, now what I would probably do is to play b6 and a5. Just holding back the white queen side, and then play the move e5, and play e5 whilst white can't play c5. And what does e5 give me? Well, it stops the knight coming into d4. It also opens up the c8 h3 diagonal. So I could play a move like queen h5 and get my bishop involved, and that's quite a few arrows now. And the other thing I might do is to move this knight from e7 maybe to g8 or g6, allow my bishop to drop back and give myself this open half-open f-file to attack with. A lot of stuff going on here. Well, in the game, Eagle played b4, and so really going for that queenside space advantage, and very yeah, very rigorously saying, yeah, this Queen A5 move doesn't interest me at all. I'd find that a little bit hard to just to give up like that. Also because it's certainly in human chess would be a slightly unexpected move, so it could easily be missed. Interesting thing is that Berserk tried once this idea: takes, knight f6, queen f6, knight d4. So this is what I was talking about. You know, concretely resolving the tension in the position. And actually, well, you know, the slight problem is that if I go bishop c8, then knight b5 hits those two pawns is extremely strong. So Stockfish was playing bishop g8, bishop b7, c5, knight b3, knight f5. And I know that this is the type of position that would give me agonies during a game, you know, sort of trying to decide, you know, I've won a pawn. Is that a good pawn, first of all? And secondly, you know, is winning this pawn better than going for a positional squeeze? And I've got no real answer to that, to be honest. I mean, it looks like a clear extra pawn to me. But actually, Berserk got nowhere against Stockfish. And, you know, that's not just because, you know, Stockfish is you know, a fair bit better than Berserk. I mean, it really looked like, you know, essentially this knight on b3 doesn't really have any good spot. And if it moves, then the knight comes into d4. And this seems to be, you know, big enough just to sort of keep some sort of balance. Obviously, you know, white's the one pressing for the win, but yeah, it wasn't very convincing in these games. So yeah, it could well be that just playing positionally with b4 is better. There is an interesting point though to this move b4. And rofChade in the game really tries to exploit it tactically, which is really interesting. I mean, when in my games between Stockfish and Berserk, Berserk was playing b6, which, you know, is going back pretty much to what I was talking about. But Stockfish was carrying on with a4 here. So again, you know, this idea of grabbing space, and well, this was turning out pretty well for Stockfish. What Stockfish was doing was playing this move knight b5 and then playing c takes b5. Rook e7, rook c4, and the interesting thing is that here Berserk didn't even try to hold the c7 pawn, but tried to give it up for counterplay. I think the problem is that we've got this move bishop h3, you know, stopping a rook coming to c8 to defend it, and it can also come into e6 if ever the rook goes to f7. So probably, you know, it's probably not possible to hold this c pawn in the long run. And yeah, I mean, it's not completely clear, right? Because, you know, white's really, you know, has really made a lot less of its queenside structure by you know, by accepting the double pawns, but actually Stockfish, you know, was already saying this was a winning advantage and managed to make it. I would say that you know, I'd be quite happy with myself if I managed to squeeze out this counterplay that that Black has got against the f2 square. But of course, you know, Stockfish manages. And well, already at this point, it's starting to look a little bit clearer. And yeah, Stockfish managed to, by you know, weaving some threats against the king together with threats against this pawn, managed to win this game. So, you know, complicated, but probably very good for white. What rofChade did was incredible. Actually, it played e takes d5, c takes d5, and then you don't want to go queen takes d5 because something like rook c7 would be very, very dangerous. But it played knight takes d5. And in principle, this is a great move. It wins a pawn and defends the pawn on c7. There is, however, a problem, a tactical problem, but rofChade had seen this. The idea is that you play g4 here. And well, we mentioned that the queen on f5 doesn't have that many squares, and that, you know, actually makes the, you know, this move knight takes d5. That's what makes it fraught, because it's defended by a piece that's rather restricted. And if you go queen e6, I just go knight takes f6. Uncovering an attack on the queen. You have to play queen f6 and then queen d5. So, you know, something like this is not particularly dangerous. And well, I mean, probably I've even got other moves rather than I mean, maybe knight c5 is very strong as well. So I mean, there's plenty of ways to win the piece there. So Black plays queen takes g4. And actually, you know, after, you know, looking at how this game went, I have to say that back on move 17, I was rather keener not on playing the move b4 here, but on playing the move h3, simply with the idea that after takes, I can play g4 and chase the queen away without actually losing my kingside pawn cover. And I like this move h3 very much because, well, I keep the possibility of going queen a5. Yeah, and I mean, I'm also keeping other plans in reserve, but seemed like a decent idea to me. And this was actually Leela's second move in the position, so I mean, not bad at all. But anyway, g4 played, queen takes g4, queen takes d5, and now bishop c6. And actually, in terms of calculation, this is not so unbelievably difficult to calculate. So, I'd say that a human grandmaster could actually calculate these lines quite without too many problems. The only big problem to it is that the amount of assessment movements they are, because we're actually dealing with some difficult material balances, and actually, just having one of them is tricky enough, but having three or four of them, within your period of calculation, I think that's what makes it very difficult. And I mean, rook takes c6 is the first thing to assess here. White's currently got two knights for the rook. Big chance that you'll get knight and bishop, because probably you're going to exchange off a knight for that bishop. Yeah, I mean, White's position feels quite attractive. The queen is nicely entrenched on c6, attacking these queenside pawns already. But it's just that weakened white king is annoying, and of course the black major pieces are pretty active. I was sort of assuming that that this wasn't actually too bad for black, but Leela was giving a 70% expected score for white, 30% expected score for black. So yeah, still a clear advantage, but this feels more like it's going to end up in a draw. And I was looking at a move like bishop e5, just with the idea of opening up the line of the rook, and maybe eventually playing the bishop to f4 and targeting h2. Leela wasn't that keen on that, but it came up with a much better idea actually. Queen f5, a4, rook e6. And just intending to get this move d5 in, which, I was looking to get it, but I didn't know how to do it. And then after knight g3, takes, queen b1, queen e4, queen a1. Black's got itself, activated very nicely. I mean, we've got threats of bishop d4, bishop c3, and also the queenside pawns are under attack. There is this thing that the king is weak, the light squares are weak, so if you could get a battery up, with queen and bishop on there, that would be great. But I think it's going to be pretty difficult. I would expect black to be able to draw this, to be honest. So what Igel did was knight takes f6, which is actually what all my engines wanted to do. G takes f6 now. One of the key points about it is that you'd think, the queen's attacked, get a desperado in. But the nice thing is that the knight attacked g4 and also defends d5. So this would actually win, two pieces for black. So black plays the move g takes f6 here, very important idea. And now white's got to be very careful. If you play queen d1 as in the game, then rook g8 just wins on the spot, just attacking this bishop on g2. So you play this move rook takes e8, which leaves the queen en prise. But there's a very, very sneaky point to it. You can just actually play rook e8 here, and if bishop f3, you've got this move rook c7, king g6, rook g8, picking up the queen. Very important that you have this. And of course, black could play a move like c6, but I mean, I can play knight e1 maybe, or rook back to e3, and I've got two rooks and a piece for for a queen. I mean, and a few pawns, but I think in general you could say that that white's going to be standing quite well, particularly because the black king is exposed, and we're going to see this quite a bit, in all the rest of the game actually. If black had a kingside pawn structure with the pawns on g7 and h6, for example, then a lot of these positions would be borderline, but because the black king is open, and the pawns are exposed, this is really going to make a very big difference. Quite interesting actually. But after rook takes e8, then black takes back with a rook on e8, and here white's got to find a path here. And here Igel's next move really surprised me, because it wasn't, at all the move that I was thinking about really. Just a couple of things to point out. I mean, if rook c6, takes, queen takes c6. Actually, Leela thought that the black was, if anyone was better, black was better here, which just goes to show. Quite tricky for white to get the pieces active. Bit surprised you're saying that the black's so fine. I'd still think white's got a slight advantage. Certainly potentially. I mean, I guess I'm thinking human game as well. But the potential for getting a knight, for things going wrong for black losing control, and white getting a knight in here and mating black, is quite high. But yeah, obviously for an engine game that might be different. The other idea, if you go queen f7, which sort of feels attractive, we just go rook g8, queen f6, rook g7, and we're not at all bothered really. We just move away, and then we're attacking these. Really, really strong here. But the move that I really wanted to play here was not queen d1, which looked very, very passive, but was to play the move queen d4. So trying to exchange off queens. So we play, the key point is bishop f6. I've got queen takes f6 check, forking these two. So queen g7 is the move that you want to play. Just threatening bishop takes f3 and also rook g8. I've got this cunning idea, queen f4. Rook e4, queen g3, that's what I can do. And, well, if you go rook g4, queen h3, let's have a look. Yeah, rook takes b4, king h1. Leela was at an 82.6% expected score. And essentially, my engines felt that, this pin is awkward, but white's going to be able to unravel. And then afterwards, feeling that was going to be very, very strong here. So what my engines were tending to do here actually was to go rook e4 in this position. Queen g3, rook takes b4. Queen g7, king g7, and playing this endgame. Now this is a very interesting endgame to look at. First of all, Stockfish is giving +2 here, so yeah, actually winning. And to be honest, I have to say I'm really impressed. Both Berserk and Stockfish managed to win every single game as white from this position. However, I do have to say that I think, technically it's very, very difficult indeed. And it's worth thinking about, why on earth did Igel-rofChade play this way? And actually, it's something that I spent a little while on in my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, explaining that one of the key defensive techniques that engines use is to sacrifice a piece for pawns, and in particular to get pawns for a knight, and then afterwards to try and hold positions with queen and knight versus queen, or rook and knight versus rook, and a lot of pawns. And the idea is really that if you've got if the opponent's structure is weak, so like this, lots of isolated pawns, then the knight finds it very hard to combine all the things that it needs to do, like protecting pawns on both wings and also getting at the opponent's position in order to try and create passed pawns of its own. Whereas the bishop is much better at controlling two wings and attacking at the same time. And yeah, really in the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement saw a lot of games like this where where black's defending like that and defending very easily. So and the chances are, with these bishops opposing each other, they're going to get exchanged. So you're going to get into this rook and knight versus rook ending. I think the key point is, though, the key curveball in this one is the weakness of these pawns. And it just means that it's really quite trivial for white to get one of those pawns and give itself a passed pawn as counterplay. In particular as well, if black doesn't get the queenside pawns rolling easily, then it can just mean that white's got time to grab a pawn and then start fighting the pawns, one win with a knight, and just have a passed pawn in reserve. And this is really what, and we're going to compare this, I think, with what happens in the game, and you'll really see what I mean there. But here somehow, rook a6 played, because if you take this one, we'll take this one with check, and then grab this one back, and then, we'll already be breaking up this lovely wall of pawns here. So black has to play a little bit passively, And then, yeah, we're just getting these this lovely tactical sequence here. And then bishop takes c6. And actually, the engines tried it both ways. They tried king d8, bishop b7, and they tried b takes c6, knight takes c6, which I think is more the the engine way of playing it. But as you can see here in this position. The black pawns have been broken already, so you're not going to have one smooth wall of pawns on the queen side coming down to you. They've been broken up already, so easier to stop. And of course, these pawns on the king side are still weak. And one thing that was quite striking, actually, I mean, this was Berserk against Stockfish. So, Berserk just playing around there, winning that pawn. You see how easily that one went. Rook f5, king g2, check, rook d5, rook a4. And if you just put this on Stockfish, then Stockfish says this is 2 points plus 2.8 for white. I mean, why is that? We're going to be able to stop these pawns. Even the king's going to be able to get involved. And we're also just going to be able to target this pawn and get it eventually. But if I put this pawn on f6 back to g7, Stockfish is saying that it's 0.00. So, I mean, really, you can see how important it is that this pawn structure is broken, and it also shows, I think, the limited power that rook and knight have against rook as well. And of course, don't forget that pure rook and knight versus rook is a trivial draw, whereas rook and bishop versus rook for engines is a trivial draw, but not for humans. So very, very interesting that, it's, but this was, really a big moment. And, actually, both Stockfish and Leela, the Kibitzers, were screaming at this point that Queen d4 had to be played. And then after Queen d1, most of the advantage had gone. So what you're getting is Rook g8, Queen e4, f3, Queen b4 here. And, well, I mean, you're seeing really that Black is very, very active here. You just can make the comparison. Black's very, very active. Again, this bishop and bishop are opposing each other. You're pretty likely to get the exchange of bishops, and well, with the black queen being so active, the rook as well, most likely you're going to have to exchange off a pair of the queens as well. So you're very likely to get this rook versus rook and knight ending. Now, of course, it's not 100% clear or anything. This is what makes Rothschilder's choice a little bit dodgy in a way. I mean, there's a lot of factors here: weak black king, exposed pawns, that make this unclear. But somehow, I mean, Stockfish did manage to win some of these as white against Berserk, but Stockfish was holding relatively easy with black against Berserk. So I think obviously it needs real superhuman play to make anything of it. And actually, Eagle didn't manage to make anything of this as white, really. So this was quite nice, actually. I thought Rothschilder played it very well from here on. A4, already getting a queenside pawn advance. So, when all the exchanges happen and you end up with rook and knight versus rook, well, at least we've already got a pawn advanced. Rook g5, very nice. Queen and rook very active. This rook also actually looking to go to h5 just to attack the pawn on h2. And you can see somehow that, yeah, the white pieces are pretty passive. Sort of, I mean, kept in check by this activity. So, yeah, I mean, the black king is not worried at all, really. f4, rook g7, rook c3, queen h5, rook e3, queen f5. Queen still causing a lot of problems, attacking all sorts of stuff. f4's been played, so there's also pressure here. Queen c1, queen d5, rook g3, queen d4 check. Got to watch out a little bit now because king h1, queen f2 is a bit irritating because rook g7, queen f1 is mate. So queen e3 played, and then we get this ending. Only you can see that this version is way, way better than anything else we've seen for black before. And yeah, again, it's not trivial, but actually, Rothschilder just plays a lot of quite aggressive moves. Essentially, you're also, you're going to exchange off those pawns, so that's great. And then all you need to do really is to stretch black so that you can come back and attack these pawns. Obviously, knight f5 allows rook f7. I mean, white will win an extra pawn, but the more pawns we liquidate, the better it's going to get. So rook b1, b3 played. So we've got a lovely protected passed pawn there. And then this is very nice as well, black actually trying to play h3 to create an outpost on g2 to start getting at that h-pawn. Knight c3, d5, knight a4, c4. You're losing pawns along the way, but you're also getting at the opponent's pawns, and this is really important. So yeah, I mean, you've lost 2 queenside pawns here, but we've got an H pawn. The A pawn is probably going to be doomed somehow. So actually, all that you've really got to watch out for is how to get that F pawn. And well, it's not trivial, but rofChade manages it like this: Rook H4, Knight E3, Rook F4, and the game was soon drawn. In actual fact, Igel played Knight F5 check to force the draw. So an absolutely fascinating game there, I have to say. I thought, yeah, I thought it was very, very interesting. This, this position, just to consider it, and also, after B4, the decision that rofChade took, very, very risky. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, worth a try, but I think it would have not have been successful against a top 3 engine like Leela or Komodo or Stockfish. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, of course, is that it was this move B4, very logical, but that really tempted rofChade to play this whole sacrifice here, because of course, after in this position, after F3, black could play Queen takes B4 here and get a 3rd pawn for the piece. If white had left the pawn on B2 or played B3 instead of B4, then this wouldn't have happened. So it's quite interesting in a way that move B4 tempted black to go for this line. But I do think it's a very I think it's something that's barely known at all. But this defensive technique of going for rook and pawns versus rook and knight, or queen and pawns versus queen and knight, I think it's something really, really important. A really good defensive technique. And as I said, I haven't seen humans really doing this at all. It's really an engine-specific thing. So, if you're playing chess, it might be worth, remembering this sometime. It might save you a half point somewhere. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that game. If you liked the video, why not give a like or subscribe to the channel, or even take a look at my new book, The Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which, well, I'm a little bit biased, of course, but I really think it's a nice book, full of amazing chess and great tips for working with engines. And otherwise, thanks very much for watching this video, and hope to see you at the next one. Thanks for watching.